tears aren't coming. The tears just aren't coming.
Okay.
Just to be clear, it looks like he's dead or he is dead.
It just looks like he's dead. He's got, like, blue paint on him or something. But he's going to be fine.
What is wrong with you?
Doctor!
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and there seems to be a pattern developing with DC Comics. Obviously, they've made a lot of changes since the pandemic happened, since the Dan Didio was fired from DC Comics. I've been very supportive, and a lot of the contributors to the channel have been very supportive, especially bringing competition for Diamond Comics online. Some people have been supportive of changing the new comic book day to Tuesday, but there seems to be a pattern that maybe it kind of feels like, just from my perspective, that maybe they're trying to abandon or they're kind of leaving the direct market behind the local comic shops, who essentially they're business partners. And here with me to talk about that today is their curmudgeon of critical himself, comic book retailer Pele. How you doing?
Oh, doing all right, Wes. This is some weird stuff, isn't it? This is
some weird stuff.
There's some shenanigans going on.
Absolutely. But before we get into the details, I do want to say, if you're visiting the channel for the first time, you've been coming around but haven't subscribed, now is the time to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoy this content and you want more stuff like this. Give us an enormous thumbs down if you don't. Either way, we'd love to hear your feedback in the comments section.
Actually, just hit the thumbs down and just smash the like button. I'm a little bit more direct than he is. Smash it.
Absolutely. Wear it out. So apparently there's a couple things we'll get to, but I'll get to the big one first. So there is a private Facebook group for comic book retailers with DC Comics where they could interact and provide feedback, and that is shutting down. It feels like DC is essentially saying they don't want the feedback. They'd rather you go through the official channels and have to go through red tape and stuff rather than have direct access to DC Comics and provide them feedback on their products.
Yeah, they really haven't been very reactive on that group anyway for some time. So it's kind of burying the dead horse. It's just they haven't I won't go say it's not active. It's just it hasn't been reactive by DC. So it's
not really useful for retailers.
They're kind of use it as a complaint box from my perspective. So it's kind of, I can kind of see the point getting rid of it. It probably, in their perspective, probably spreads more negativity than anything else. But I think this is a trend where, again, we're seeing DC cutting the fat. And they're trying to do anything they can to cut costs, even if it's, minor. So I don't know if they're really abandoning LCS or abandoning the direct market as much as they're getting into such a cost-cutting frame of mind that anything that isn't absolutely necessary has got to go. So
okay, so you think, taken as like an individual action, it's pretty mundane. But I think if we kind of look at things at the bigger picture and some of the other things, the other big piece of news that came out recently is they announced all the happenings for Batman Day. And it includes, there's a virtual 5K, 10K run. You can change your Waze app to have a Batmobile on it, maybe chase a Joker around. I'm not really sure about that one. There's a bunch of stuff. There's sales for clothes and stuff like that. But there's nothing in there that supports retailers or gets people in their comic book retail shops. No specials on Batman comics, no reprints on something, or maybe a free Batman comic to get people into shops. It feels like they let the retailers out on that one.
Yeah, I think it's more being cheap. Batman Day, we've always gotten a Detective 27 reprint or, just something or another that was, cheap, but could be interesting. But, I mean, I'm trying not to look at this as DC just dumping the direct market, just as them mostly being really cheap, trying to cut corners. I mean, I think that ultimately it may lead to something serious. If it does, I can't say that I would be incredibly surprised, but I don't see them leaving the direct market yet. And,
no, I don't mean this. This isn't a direct, like they're leaving it this year, even next year. But it feels like they're kind of they're not giving the direct market the resources that it needs, and they're kind of diverting their attention to other markets, and they're kind of trying to leave it behind.
I found out that DC's budget on promotions and stuff has been slashed to the bone. They don't have a budget anymore for promotions. Everything is pretty much, on a event by event basis, from what I understand. So it could be cost cutting. It could be just cost cutting that they just do not have the money. And AT&T saying, hey, this is it. This is where the rubber meets the road, and we don't have anything. Could very well be it. And, considering the cuts to the line, there is no charity work anymore for any artists that aren't cutting it and writers that aren't cutting it. They're just letting people go, or they're, cutting back on events and cutting back on projects. So, they just,
I don't know if they're cutting back on events. It feels like they're doing more events. They're just cutting back on like ongoings of not.
Well, I was talking about how 5G got cut. 5G got cut back, and then they cut back some of the paper launches on things, to just go wholly digital. Well,
speaking of digital, that's another thing I want to talk to. Thank you for segueing into that. Yeah. Obviously, they've done digital only comic books for big franchises like Deceased. Obviously, Injustice, which was always digital first anyway. But, there's a Harley Quinn, Black, White, and Red. I believe there's going to be a Batman Black and White. So they are putting a lot of important comic books over on digital only.
Right.
Local comic shops wouldn't, get a piece of the pie or be able to deliver those products to their customers. Some of those are big franchises. Deceased is really popular.
Yeah. Yeah, you know how much I love Deceased, and I found out that, At World's End wasn't even going to be published on paper. So I was like, damn, that's a shot in the balls. I love that. But I ended up having to read on which is fine. I read it on my iPad. It was fine. Prefer paper, but it's the way it is. They're moving more towards digital for specific franchises. They're moving more towards digital I think, comics that they feel they're going to fall underneath the certain level of distribution. That makes sense, especially if they're being that cheap and they don't want to go through printing. I think that we're going to see a lot of stuff like that, especially from DC, because, they don't have the money to play with like they used to have. I think the overlords are really, cutting it close to the bone with them. I think that I think, again, what AT&T is looking at here is you've got a bunch of kids that have been running roughshod for a while and, burn through budgets, and they probably aren't very good with money. They don't seem to have an idea of what people like to buy, probably have run out of good grace. It's going to take a while maybe for them to get back into AT&T's favor again, so they can actually have money for doing the things that are larger events, larger, more expensive type of projects. But for now, they're just going to have to get along the best way they can.
Yeah, they're also looking for markets outside the direct market. Obviously, they're putting a lot of focus on these YA graphic novels, really putting some bastardized versions of their characters out there.
Yeah.
But, those are, mostly going to impact bookstore sales. They're not going to so much go into direct comic shops as well.
They sell. I mean, the YA stuff does sell. They've got to go with what sells right now.
And that market is expanding while the market
direct
for single issue comic sales is kind of shrinking. That market is expanding every year.
Because Amazon is getting bigger and Amazon is reaching more people, and anybody can open the app and buy whatever they want. And although schools right now are getting limited as far as Scholastic is concerned, there's always going to be the retail market, Walmart, whatnot too. I've seen some of the DC YA graphic novels at Walmart. Some of that is going to happen. I don't think the direct markets, like we said before, the direct market's not going to go away. Direct market's not going to be shunned. I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now. How many stores are actually going to survive the pandemic?
Well, yeah, brick and mortar, just retail across the board is in jeopardy right now, whether it's restaurants, comic book shops, record stores, anything. If it's brick and mortar and it requires people to go out of their house, visit your store to make the purchase, and you're not Walmart or you're someplace big that has a grocery store attached to it, it's very uncertain.
Yeah, it's like, well, the DC, my DC rep I talked to a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if I mentioned it to you. I think I did, but asked me, how important was new comics for my business, and how much was DC, new comics from DC in my business. And I said, oh, not really. I said, maybe 4 or 5% of sales, and just dead silence on the phone. Oh. It's like I can't rely on you guys. I can't rely on Marvel. I have to make my own way, and I can't do that with what's going on right now. If you look at the way that it's panning out, especially in large urban centers, 50% of all retail stores in San Francisco are shuttering this year across the board. Now, I'm not talking about comics. I'm talking about all retail establishments. 50% gone in 1 year. And Greensboro, North Carolina, 40% of all stores are gone in 1 year.
I've heard rumors of
it's
very
crazy.
well-established comic shops that, if you're a comic fan, you know who they are. It's like places that would be destinations that are looking into closing their shops and moving them, or just getting out of the business altogether right now.
Yeah, I'm working with one specifically to buy their back issue collection inventory. I'm working, and I've already talked with another one too on top of that. These are not huge chains, but they're iconic chains. They're either looking to pack up completely, or they're looking to move entirely into a lighter storefront type of thing, and stop selling back issues and just sell new comics and pops and stuff like that. I think that they're making a horrible decision. I've got the receipts to prove it. The thing is, you have to do it a certain way. You can't just, have 1.5 million comic books in a warehouse. You have to curate what you have. Either they don't have the know-how to do it, or they just don't have the patience and the will to do it. Yeah, I think it's a little one and some of the other in these cases. But
I would definitely say, the uncertainty of retail probably is working into this. But there's a few other signs that DC might not have faith in direct market, or making decisions without consulting or concerning what the direct market thinks. When they brought on Lunar and UCS, it was an abrupt change, but they were supposed to stay with Diamond. But then they went exclusive to those two distributors without ever talking to retailers. And just boom, one day you had to get an account with Lunar or UCS within the next few weeks. Yeah. And it was a huge change. They did not consult anybody. They didn't let anybody know it was coming down the pike. Looking back on it, with what we're seeing progressively, at the time it seemed like bad optics, but now like I said, it feels like a trend. Yeah,
I think that I don't know if it's a trend, or it's just that the chaos is so bad that it's just shitty all over. There was a lot of stores that didn't think Diamond would survive this year. I mean, and I'm sure that the publishers probably felt the same way. I was very concerned as a retailer. I was concerned that Diamond just would not come back, regardless of what Jeppy said. I was laying even odds that Diamond just would fold in the face of the pandemic. We're not out of 2020 yet. I know, and we're still not out. But I didn't think they would even come back to where they are now. I was giving it even odds, and we're still not out. And DC's move may have crippled them. So it's a very interesting time. I think in a lot of ways we've not seen anything this bad ever in comics, as far as putting the entire industry into an area of uncertainty. And in a lot of ways, it looks bleak, and it's going to take a lot of shuffling. It's going to take a lot of work, I think, for new comics to survive in any form that like it was before. I don't think that no comic book store is going to get out of this unscathed. Marvel's certainly not. DC is going to be even worse shape. And, it's going to require some consolidation, and, we're going to have to kind of just feel it out as we go. So you think DC's in worse shape, even though they have the three Jokers,
huge success, $7 comic book. They've got
Yeah.
Joker War going on right now. They got Death Metal, which seems to be selling like hotcakes.
Mhm.
Really, Marvel doesn't have anything like that. Thor's doing really well, and Venom. But
Yeah, I think that mostly because their parent company is despite Disney's problems, is still in better shape than AT&T. And
Disney's about to go bankrupt.
no, they've still got access to more debt that AT&T
Yeah, like $12
simply
billion.
does not have. No, they've got
They
access
also
to
have to.
they've got access to more debt than AT&T does. So, it's still,
Their
and also it
expenses every day that they aren't making money on are enormous.
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They still got licensing deals that are worth more than what they can lose in a year. I mean, you've still got the fact that they haven't even punched in, their latest movies yet. They've got the next phase of Marvel's MCU of the MCU that's going to be a huge cash cow. So
I feel bad for anybody that's counting on the movie industry for the next 12 months.
I don't. I think it's going to be pretty successful for them because people are just dying to actually get out and do something. So,
Well,
I mean, it's
we'll
going
see
to,
about
it's not going to be, what we saw before, but it's still going to be profitable. And I just think that Marvel, the way that Marvel's looking at it is in a healthier way than DC.
Really?
Right
Because
now.
I feel like DC is setting themselves up for the future, and Marvel's just sitting there
Really?
doing nothing. Yeah.
Huh, I don't see that. I see that Marvel is, being
Well,
a
DC
little
has
bit.
brought on new distribution. They put it on a new focus on digital comics. They've gotten all these new YA graphic novels. They've cut down their line.
Mhm.
It feels like they have a vision of the
Marvel
future.
is still leading the top 20 in comic sales every month. They still have more comics in the top 20. They're still selling more as far as 65% of the new market still. It's still a healthier position to be in. DC, I'm seeing as they're having a lot of troubles right now, and I think that potentially we could see the entire publishing end of it get sold off. That's what I'm worried about right now, is just that AT&T is just going to cut their losses and sell the publishing end. But don't know. We'll
I
have
don't
to
think
see
they
what
would
happens
get any
later
money
this
for
year.
it.
Huh?
DC Publishing makes money for AT&T, but it doesn't make much. I don't what would people pay for it just to publish the comics?
I think that it might be able to get a little bit out of that as far as the licensing to publish the comics, but they do pretty well on that. I'm afraid that what they'd be looking at is that we can get X, which isn't that much less than this, and we wouldn't have to put our resources into it, and that's kind of scary. They could potentially go that route, and then we would just lose. We would lose all the momentum that DC's gained, with Rebirth and everything, and the positive changes that have happened.
Yeah, it's very uncertain. Like I said, taken as individual events, it doesn't really mean much. But when you think about all the change, not consulting comic shops when they do these major changes as far as distribution, not having any mechanism to drive people to their comic book retail partners for Batman Day, shutting down their private Facebook group where you could have interaction with retailers in DC.
Well, look what they did with Batman's wedding. I mean, they shafted everybody, and that was on purpose. They have a history of, I'd say, in the last probably last decade, DC really hasn't had a event or situation like that's actually gone off without a hitch. There's always been something that's kind of screwed retailers over to one degree or another. It's a trend, but maybe it's even a longer trend than we would realize. So
you're not willing to say that they're trying to abandon the market. You think they're changing their perspective, but they are still committed to the direct comic market.
I think so still. I don't think that they're just trying to cut it loose. No.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Pele. Very interesting your perspective. I appreciate you coming on, dropping some knowledge here for the viewers and myself. And I cannot wait to do the next Worst of the Week. And there won't be any Comics Aficionados this weekend because it is my anniversary. But we'll
Yeah,
definitely
you're
be
going.
doing the,
You're going to go and party and and
shit.
get drunk on the beach or something, aren't you?
Nah, no, we're not going to be able to do that. But we are going to have a
well.
good time,
Oh, well.
and I'm not going to be able to do the live stream.
Okay, man. Well, you have a good time.
All right, later, brother.
Take care.